Okay, we're just going to dive in here. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all so much for taking the time to come and have this conversation with me. I'm Tina Bellavo. I think I know all of you. I did have a few people find this on Instagram and come along. But just to say a tiny bit about me, I've been in the real estate industry for 20 years now, which seems very rude, but it's true. Rude to me. I am in the Baltimore metro area, and I have basically done every facet of the business from being a solo agent to being on someone else's team. I formed my own team in 2013, so it's now been 10 years of team leadership. And one of the things that has been so beneficial about that chapter of my business is it really forced me to make a lot of things systematic and reliable so that I can, manage the overhead and the lead flow and everything that comes along with having a team. So these types of marketing topics have been on my mind for a very long time, and it's definitely been an evolution. And I feel like technology has come such a long way, especially as it relates to email marketing, which is, I think about the tools that I use now. I feel like they didn't even exist 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm very grateful to have those kinds of tools. So with all of that being said, I am basically just decided to change what I was doing with my email marketing to my sphere. And I thought, I bet some other people would be interested in it. And as I was preparing my little like brain dump and outline for today, I was like, this isn't that earth-shatteringly like innovative. But I think for me, sometimes it's just like complexity is the enemy of just execution. So I'm hoping that what I did here can kind of inspire you to like go and do your own version of this in some shape or form. So I'll give just like a little bit of backstory on my history with email marketing and kind of the pivot that I've made. I'm going to talk about the platform that I use, which is Flowdesk, just as a spoiler alert. And most of you probably have heard of it and may even be using it. And I've been using Flowdesk for about 3 years now, maybe longer. So I really have like also refined the way that I use it. So I'm hoping to kind of give some tips and best practices. And then I'm going to basically show you guys my new newsletter, which I kind of consider a newsletter a dirty word in email marketing. Because I don't know, when you guys hear newsletter, can you just tell me in the chat box, like, what is the adjective that comes to mind when you hear the word newsletter? Because I will hold off on saying mine and give you guys a second to write yours. But my word is boring. I'm like, oh, great, some recurring information that is the same every time and like slightly, regurgitated. Um, but I just started reading someone else's email newsletter that completely inspired me to think differently about that strategy. So I'm kind of course correcting some prior thoughts that I had. And then I'm going to show you my new newsletter. And then I am going to send some follow-up resources. I'm obviously recording this. I have some links and information, and I will give you a copy of my newsletter. Unfortunately, Flowdesk doesn't have a straight up template function. I email them about once a year and request the feature, but they're not listening. So you kind of have to recreate it yourself in the platform or have, hire someone to do that. But that's kind of where we're going today. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of backstory because I feel like the why matters a little bit more, well, with anything with marketing. I feel like thinking about what you're doing and who your target audience is and what the ideal outcome is that you're actually trying to drive is this like extra like work at the beginning that is very worthwhile, but sometimes hard to do if you're like not in that practice or you don't even kind of know what you're missing. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. So I've been using email in my business forever. Actually, back when my very first hire in 2008 or nine was an intern, and she was doing email for me way back then. So I've had a lot of experience doing a lot of different things. And at 2020, I basically decided that I wanted to reboot everything about marketing my business, and email was a huge part of it because up until then, I had been sending 2 emails a month that were super newslettery, very repetitive. But most importantly, I was really off in the content that I was sending to my sphere. And by the way, today is all about marketing to your sphere. There's so many facets to email. This is like that general, like 33 touch or whatever you want to call it, of just like staying in front of people so that they remember you and refer you and hire you as like very, very, very foundational. And that's why I think it's so important to get this right, because when you don't get it right, and what I was doing back in like a prior iteration was I had a lot of people opting out because it was irrelevant information and it wasn't aesthetically pleasing at all. So I was just kind of losing the opportunity to market to my sphere, because once people opt out, that's it. You're not opting them back in. You usually can't, and you shouldn't anyway. And then you're left with other ways of marketing that are more expensive and manual, like calling them or mailing to them, or like it just closes out so much of the opportunity. So basically, in early 2020, I was like, oh my gosh, I have so many people that have opted out. And how can I just kind of change what I'm doing with this strategy? So I made a couple decisions back then that I've been refining over time. So one of the decisions I made was to only share things that were worth sharing. So literally like no filler. Like I would rather send fewer emails per year than send so much junk that people ultimately opt out from it. So basically like a huge like course correction with quality versus quantity, which is just a choice that I made. And I feel like there's a million ways to look at marketing. Some people would do the like Grant Cardone like 10x rule. Like that's just not my like sensibility. That's not how I want to communicate or be communicated with. So quality was something that I started to focus on a lot more. And then the other thing was I really, something really clicked when I realized, 90% of my sphere doesn't want to buy or sell a house right now. So there are things that most real estate agents, including me, put in their email marketing that are completely irrelevant to your sphere, like inviting them to an open house. I mean, maybe if it happened to be down the street, someone might be wanting to like check out their neighbor's house. And that's where I think having segmented lists and targeting people for messages that are relevant to them personally can make a lot of sense. But if someone isn't thinking about moving right now, they're probably not interested in open houses just listed or just sold, at least as the centerpiece. Like that might be a footnote. That might be a credibility thing that you do inside of a message that would actually speak to someone who is just happy in their home, who likes you, who thinks well of you from the experience they had when they bought or sold a home with you previously, and they just want to kind of be part of your network. But I realized I needed to stop attacking people with buyer and seller messaging when they were not in a buyer and seller headspace. So then I was like, well, then what the F am I going to send people? Because that was like my playbook in a lot of ways. Like, here's everything our team sold this month. And people do like looking at houses. And that's where I actually started thinking, like, okay, how can I show them that kind of content in a way that's actually interesting? People like to look at pretty houses. They like to look at interesting houses. They like funny things like Zillow Gone Wild. So I started to think about how can I start targeting content to people that is just interesting, regardless of like what phase they are in the buyer and seller cycle. So that is something I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute. And then the other thing was that I did realize I needed to select a platform with the right aesthetics. And then also, and when I say aesthetics, like just good design, things that optimize people actually like the readability when they open the email so that they can see what you spent the time creating and digest it. And at the time, I was using two different things to send email out, and they both had issues with delivery and even hitting people's inboxes. So there's like a huge variation in platforms. I've even found like my CRM, which is Follow Up Boss. I don't know if anyone uses Follow Up Boss. It's a wonderful CRM, but the email sending part of it goes to a lot of people's spam for me. So there are a lot of tools out there, but if you're going to make emails, you really want it to hit people's inbox and for them to actually open it. So Flowdesk has really just been that all-in-one solution for me. So just to kind of like jump to that, and I'm going to show you guys the back end of it just a little bit in a screen share. So couple things about why I love it. The aesthetics are top notch, just like a lot of white space, very clean, very readable, very easy to kind of pop images in and kind of break up large chunks of text with images and buttons and, opportunities for them to click and go follow you on Instagram or engage with you and things like that. So I found it's really increased the amount that people actually read what I send and the engagement rates of whether they respond or click on something or just feel like it's something they actually want to open and look forward to reading. And then the other thing is I was using MailChimp before, which was actually a lot more expensive than Flowdesk. And by the way, I'm not like trying to give a Flowdesk sales pitch, but I feel like I always like to know what tools are out there and if I'm like missing anything. Um, and if I need to bother looking into other things. And I would say I've looked into like a lot of the other email platforms. I've just never found anything that compares. So it's about $40 a month. I think it's $39 a month to be exact. I pay on an annual membership. Um, and that's like an unlimited number of emails per month. So if you have a big sphere like me and you're emailing, I mean, my sphere isn't huge because it's all people I know. Some people have like, tens of thousands of internet leads. I have about 5,000 people that I email on a monthly basis, and there's no extra fee. Whereas some of the other services out there, like the more contacts you have, the more they charge you. So that really works for me, very user friendly. And I just started to get really good feedback from my sphere. People will just write back and say things like, wow, like that was a really good email. And it's not that I need to be complimented on my marketing, although that's always nice. But what I know is part of how I built my reputation as a really strong listing agent is people know that I'm really good at marketing. And what does that mean in their mind? It means that I'm going to do a really great job with marketing their property too. And my ideal client is a seller or someone who needs to buy or sell. So for me, it all just kind of like aligns with this overarching strategy of when you hire me or my team by extension, you're going to get the best with marketing. And that is what sellers are looking for. So that's what I do with Flowdesk. I do have an affiliate code I'm going to share later. And I will say, whether you use mine or not, I don't care, but you get 50% off for the first year. And I didn't know that. So I paid full price for year one, and you can get 50% off and do a free trial if you want to try it. So I'll send that out later, but I can't recommend the platform enough. If they like shut down tomorrow, I would be devastated because I don't know how else I would send email because they're just head and shoulders above from like an aesthetic and user like friendliness standpoint. So to kind of jump past that, I'm going to just explain my current strategy and what I'm doing. So, like I said, in my opinion, an experience, maybe 10% of my sphere at the most is thinking about buying or selling right now. And I would actually assert that it's a lower percentage in this low inventory, high interest rate climate that we've been in. So, the thought for me again is how do I engage all these other people who I want to stay, again, not opted out, referring me, feeling connected to me, maybe I'm in a season where not as many of them are looking to buy or sell, but I still want to maintain the strong relationship because I'm in it for the long haul and I know that you are too. So I really had to give even more thought of like, I feel like for the first couple years of this like pandemic and post pandemic market, I had a lot to say about prices going up and what's going on. And lately it started to feel like more of the same. Like, yes, prices are still up. I pulled the stats and I'll show you guys. In the Baltimore Metro, the average sale price is up $100,000 since 2019 compared to the end of 2023. So it's great news for sellers. But the weird thing is, I feel like it's just been the same thing that I'm saying over and over, which is fine. But I started to feel like, how can I just pivot this a little bit more to have it just be relevant to people wherever they're at today? So that was kind of the backstory of some of the changes that I've made. I aim to get one email out per month to my sphere that is in this like category of something that is like quality driven. It's personally curated. It's not automated. It's not like a Zestimate. And there's like a lot of really good software options for sending automated home valuations. And I have a platform for that. And that is like a separate bucket. So my sphere gets that touch if I have their home address and their email. And for all my past clients, I have that. And I try and get that for a lot of other people too. So that's kind of running over there. So then this is more the like brand building, credibility building, etc. And this is the part where it's just work. Like in my experience, like no one's going to do my email for me unless it's, of course, like someone that I employ, like, an admin or a contractor. But it's hard to like find good content driven email in a box. Like I'm sure probably half of you that are here on this Zoom have tested people's like canned email content and found that it just was lacking for like it didn't sound at all like something you would say, or it had no relevance to the area or whatever the case may be. So I feel like we all have to make our own decisions with how we want to handle our marketing. But for me, I was just like, okay, like I would rather do the work, like the mental work to have something quality that is coming from me than send people the canned stuff because I really saw the downside of that. So I do really come up with all of the copy, like the writing for and sort of the content for the emails. I do have someone who now kind of designs them for me and handles basically taking what I think and then putting it together and sending it out, which is super helpful. So we're all, I know I can just see who's on the Zoom and everyone's kind of different with whether they have a team or admin support or not. But I'm a big fan of this is something you can do once a month, spend maybe 2 hours realistically on it, put something together that's short and sweet. And by the way, like people don't like to read long emails. So it can be one thing that's enough. So it does not, I think like when I think newsletter too, I think like long multi-part thing that like I won't necessarily always read that unless it's really, really good. And that's kind of what caught my attention about this person's newsletter that was inspiring me. So just kind of some thoughts to kind of stir it up for everybody of how to look at this. So over the last few years, I've been sharing kind of from this strategy of my ideal client lives in this area. They already own a home and they're probably going to sell it and buy something else at some point, or maybe even cash out and downsize and like move out of the area. Like those are kind of my two target market people. So what do they have in common? They live here and they're a homeowner. So therefore, what would they all be interested in mutually? It would be things that are local. They are interested in their equity. And that's where I really leverage the other tool for their equity kind of tracking and updates on a monthly basis. Um, but also kind of just sharing overviews of what the real estate market is doing. I've leaned on doing that quarterly because I just found it boring to do that every single month, but kind of once a quarter, I was working that in. And then one of the things that I really took on a few years ago was just kind of sharing from this perspective of like, I'm your resource for all things home, which again, not that innovative of a concept, but if you've been struggling with thinking about what to say to your sphere, I feel like every month, if you could just come up with like an angle of something about improving the value of your home and not the like same like super low level. Like I think anyone knows they should like paint their house, like not the most low level. So like really like using my brain, kind of like turning that on and thinking like what's trending, what's like a little known tactic or tool and things like that. So that's what I've been doing over the last few years. And I have really good open rates on my emails. I get over 50% of them opened. Back when I was doing the really crappy canned type stuff, I was getting open rates under 20%, which is, I think, in alignment with the industry standards. So I've really been like crushing with the open rate. My click through rates are pretty good, which means people are actually clicking in my emails and like maybe going to a resource. By the way, Flowdesk has a way to embed your Instagram feed at the bottom. That always gets the most clicks. And I wonder if anyone has a guess of why did the Instagram post get the most clicks? I have a theory. I've never actually like researched it, but I'm curious if anyone has a thought. And that actually ties into what I'm doing some more. So, oh, and I love hearing Hillary say in the chat box their open rate has gone through the roof since using Flowdesk. Okay, I don't see any guesses about Instagram yet, so I'm just gonna say I think people like to stalk. I think they want to like find out more about my personal life and what I'm up to and what I'm doing and just like literally like getting a bird's eye view into like my house or whatever. Because I think, with as real estate agents, like people want to connect to us as people. They also want to trust us. They want us to be credible. They want us to know what we're doing, but they do want to like you and feel some level of connection to you, at least the kind of clients that I want to work with, which would be people who are relationship driven and will want to stay in a relationship with me long term and help me grow my relationships and be part of my what I call our TBG community. So that was kind of where I was like, you know what? I'm reading this other person's newsletter where she's giving really good tips. And her newsletter is business to business facing. It's called the 2%. Her name is Danielle Canny. And I don't know if any of you know her. She's the co-founder of Boss Babe. So if anyone follows that Instagram account, they have like a huge following. They know a lot about marketing. She's now split off and done her own thing. And she shares like what she's learning every week. And then the thing that I love is she sends 5 audios that are trending on Instagram every week for reels. So I just open her email every week and save the audios and then use them if I like them. So that obviously has very little relevance to marketing to your sphere, except for I am hooked on that newsletter. I save it until it's funny. I read it at my desktop, but then I leave it in my inbox and then later I go in and pull my audios out. So it's like become something that I kind of rely on. So I started to think, well, how could this translate to what I'm doing with my clientele? And the thing about me, and I would imagine this is similar for all of you, but you're probably going to have your own slightly different flavor of it, is I have been doing real estate for a long time. I do know a lot of people, and everyone knows that I know a lot of people. So everyone does want to know who I know and like my connections. And what's happened for me being in the business for so long is I I just get tired of stuff after a while. So yes, I can still refer you to like contractors and chimney people and whatever, but I'm just so bored by that. So like that was a strategy I used a long time ago. I had like a business directory and I like spent a lot of time curating that, but I just got bored with it. And then there's also this like correlated thing, and I don't know if anyone else relates to this, but since COVID, I've had 2 kids. I work from home. My life is much more insular than it was for a long time. So I'm not like a woman about town who knows like all the cool new restaurants that are like opening now or whatever. And that's what I was kind of telling myself. So I was sort of like, even this strategy of sort of being like the local mayor that has been sort of one of my like things for a long time, I just wasn't seeing it. And then I was like, you know what? Like I do go places and I do like have my own things that like I'm doing constantly. And I actually think people are interested, coming back to kind of the Instagram connection with like Flowdesk and all of that. So I was like, you know what? Like I think I just am going to start sharing like a couple things every month that I recommend in a couple different categories. So like this is what I'm up to with my kids right now. This is where I got food and maybe it's just like takeout, like a very like simple suggestion. And then like anything else that I'm kind of doing or want to involve people in. So again, like this is not earth shattering at all, but I basically just had to like turn my brain on and think about how can I just bring a local flavor to my sphere. And it actually clicked because I was coaching 2 other people how to do it and they started doing that with their emails and then I was like, "Oh, I could do that, but I would love to like editorialize a little bit more because I think people like to know your thoughts and opinions at least to some degree." So I'm going to just show you guys what I came up with. I was basically like, I'm going to go with this like local focus and I'm going to focus on local events, whether they're mine or somebody else's, and then like a couple local tips. And then if I have anything else to say, I'll add it. Otherwise, it's going to be super short and sweet. So where I landed was this. So this is like a preview of how the email looks. Um, and there's a lot of other things that I teach people strategically with like subject lines. Because by the way, the subject line is what causes people to open the email. Duh. But if your subject line doesn't catch their interest, that's going to tank your open rate. So that's like the biggest thing I would say to get people to open the email if you're going to take the time to like personally create something or at least like write a few sentences and have someone format it. So, couple just kind of high level things with Flowdesk. I use a lot of white space. I always use white backgrounds. I don't do a lot of color or heavy chunks of like anything, just so it's super readable on mobile. Since think about how much you scroll your email on your phone versus your computer. And then I use a lot of images, pretty images. I actually just bought a bundle of stock photography because similarly, I was just feeling like, you know what? I'm just not because I'm out of production. Probably all of you are still selling houses in the field. I just don't take as many photos that are relevant for social media anymore. So I was like, I need to just buy some. So I got like a very affordable stock photography membership and built like a library. So now I can just pull images in whenever I need something. Flowdesk also gives you a ton of free images. Um, so one of the things I like about the newsletter I'm getting from Danielle called the 2% is there's like a little content thing at the top. So I just stole that of like giving people like a preview of what's in the email. So in this case, it's about events, my favorite local spots. And then I hadn't done a home value update in a while. So I just added this at the end. I actually feel like this email is a little bit too long. but I just went with it because it was all there. And I was like, I'll just send this one. The next one's probably going to be a lot shorter. All good. So I always include a first name field, which any email has that, but I also use first names and subject lines sometimes. That definitely helps the open rate. And I just decided to explain a little bit of what I was doing. I try, and it's funny. One of the best copywriting tips I learned is to write your copy and then cut it down by 50% and find a way to say this what you started saying with less words. So I just write it and then I go back and edit it and shorten and just make things like punchier and more readable. I think remembering that we're dealing with like mobile phones and very low attention spans is just like a huge factor with email. So I try to never have more than 2 sentences per paragraph, as you'll see here. So I basically said, spring's in the air, I'm ready to come out of hibernation. And then letting people know I'm pivoting a little bit with what's going on in the newsletter, read on about some upcoming local events. And by the way, if you know about something I should highlight, so that's the strategy of getting what's called user generated content, getting tips from my sphere that I will then recycle back into the newsletter in the future. Or if it's not email newsletter worthy, maybe I just put it on Instagram, mine or my team's. So I'm going to start highlighting local events and I'm going to give actually a shorter bulleted rundown anytime there's not an event that I'm personally hosting. But in this case, I actually have 2 events coming up after kind of a long break between events. So I'm hosting a charitable event, so I highlight that. I just love Flowdesk because it has like really pretty buttons for to click an RSVP. There's a lot of ways to embed images, and that really helps again break up the text, make things more interesting, more readable. I'm a big fan actually of one big image. This is cute, but on mobile, it's actually a little bit hard to see. So just like a best practice, one nice looking image can elevate your email so quickly. So those are my events. But again, moving forward, I am going to make this a bulleted list with links and make it just more a little bit more informational and then add images as needed. And then I'm trying something new. I'm doing a cookie decorating party for my sphere next month. So this was just a save the date. A separate invite is going out next week. Maybe I'll show you guys that too if you want to see it. So again, just kind of throwing that out there. I do put a lot of links in my email. And it's funny what gets so many clicks. Like this cookie decorating company got so many clicks on the email. So people are just they want to kind of stalk and look around. So one of my things is just sort of creating all these different like inroads for people to have their own, like internet scrolling experience like we all like to have. But what I'm feeling the most excited about is this local flavor of the month. So I just said, here are a few local spots I'm digging right now. And again, if you want to put something on my radar, let me know. And when I did this exercise to prepare for the email, I was just like, what do I want to say? And then I was like, I literally opened my calendar and I was like, what did I do in the last week? Because I can't remember anything anymore anyway, ever since having kids. And I was like, oh yeah, we loved Oregon Ridge, the nature center. And I just wrote down what I thought. And one of the things that I've really embraced with my email marketing is just being a lot more personal because I used to be like overly professional and kind of like stilted in some of my emails. Like I was trying to sound so businessy. And as I've done this longer and longer and also really embraced social media, I've really understood how much people just kind of connect with me and you as a person. So I just wrote like what I would say in an Instagram story or what I would say to a friend about these 3 things. So I think I'm definitely going to do this for my kids as a recurring just because A, that's my life phase. It's what I have the most to say about. And B, coming back to my target audience. I have so many clients that are in either their forever home already or they're in that in between. So I'm just kind of speaking to the family audience. And then I always have something on my list to try. So I'm definitely going to keep that as a category. This is a restaurant that I just heard about that opened near me. And then I asked, have you been yet? Reply to let me know your thoughts. I got several responses to my email. And just like as a test of your email marketing, how often do people actually reply and say something to you? That's always like a kind of indicator for me of whether people read it, and B, if they actually have something to say about it, that's just like a good sign. And then one person in particular had recently referred me a seller and we had a whole back and forth. And that was like this like extra special touch to, a top relationship where I did nothing but like send the email and then she came back to me. And then I find it so easy to just respond to people. So that's like one of my big things with marketing is just like, I love to do the bulk contact versus the one-to-one calls and texts. And then if you want to talk to me, like let's talk, but I'm not going to like chase people down to talk to them. So like I love operating my business this way. And then I'm going to basically share a business that I love. This is sharing the place that I've been doing Pilates. And then I pulled images from these three things just to make it a little bit more interesting. And they all link to a couple different things. So interestingly, the Pilates lab stuff got really huge clicks. I think just because her studio is so pretty. So again, like you can't go wrong with beautiful images of high-end homes, which I know sounds like so duh, but think about the kind of marketing you've been putting out, and are you kind of adhering to that thought or not? Like people just love, love, love eye candy. So when all else fails, highlighting a beautiful recent home sale in the area, and if it's not yours, just credit the person appropriately and, ethically and all of that, and share an insight, share something that you have to say about it. But I feel like we all have somewhere that we're going with our kids, or we're grabbing food to go, or, whatever the case may be. And I heard from people about all of this. And one of my fails is I didn't give specifically the Pilates lab owner a heads up. And I forwarded her the newsletter last night and was like, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I put you in my newsletter. And she was so touched. And then she gave me a promo code to share with my network for anyone who signs up. And I actually gave the promo code out to someone this morning. So if you want to like learn from my mistake, talk to people before you do it. And they may even want to like add a little something in. But either way, this section did really well. And then even in my Instagram comments, somebody told me they love this email so much they read it out loud to their husband or child and talked about going to this restaurant. So I feel like this is not like the most innovative thing in the world, but I basically just had to like use my brain for a little bit and really think about like I do a lot. Like what can I just say and share from like this local place? So I'm gonna end in a minute. I said 30 minutes and it's already 10:33. So I did feel like I needed to do a home value recap, and I really talk in great depth about how to communicate market stats in the academy that I have for agents. But just kind of a high level tip I would give you is you really want to focus on like one or two things at the most, and you need to put things into language people understand. For example, telling me that home prices rose 25% over this period of time, that's like, okay, but I think $100,000 is much easier for a consumer to wrap their mind around than a percentage. So I basically quickly pulled stats. I said, let me just compare the end of 2019, like pre the COVID run up, to the end of 2023, this 4-year period. I just looked at the average home prices and then did the math. And then I put it into language that people could understand. I use bold and italics just to help kind of the eye go to what is most interesting. And quite frankly, I probably didn't even need this part. Um, I think stats, you just want to be really brief. I see people put things sometimes on social media, very, very busy graphics. And there's two issues. One, it's just hard to read. And two, the consumer doesn't necessarily interpret statistics as like their day-to-day life. So I think just giving them a broad understanding and then understanding like what the opportunity is for them. So I'm a big fan of incentivizing people to book a call. This goes to Calendly and they book a 30-minute call and that goes on my calendar. And then I distribute that to someone on my team to take the call. And then I always end with sometimes I put a call to action here, sometimes not. And then so this is an auto import of my company Instagram feed, and you can choose, you could have like 10 posts here, you could have three, you can choose what shape they are. These generally get a lot of clicks. And by the way, this is a stock image that I recently bought. My team's in the middle of selling 60 investment properties that are really not cute. It's huge. We've had the biggest first quarter in the history of my team, but it's done us no favors from a marketing standpoint. So we're now mixing a lot of stock photography in. So if you're feeling like you want to kind of elevate the aesthetic of what you're putting out there, I would encourage you to look at that. And there's a lot of free stock photography on Canva and Unsplash. So just some tips for you. And then just a couple other little email tips. I always have a footer, and these links get so much action. It's crazy. Like, it's weird how many people look at the footer. There must be some, I don't know if you've ever heard this about marketing, but if you add like a PS to a message, PSs are very well like people always want to see what a PS is. So I feel like this is like the email equivalent of that. And does anyone want to take a guess, looking at my link bar, which one gets the most clicks? And feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say.
Is it the business directory?
Nope, sorry, but
Really?
thanks for playing.
Yeah, no problem.
Anyone else?
Meet our team.
That's the second most because people want to always like stalk the team. And then
Facebook group.
luxury gets the biggest clicks. And I think there's something about luxury because it's so aspirational for any human being to have a nicer house than they have right now. It's just this like think about like your buyers, like they always want the house that's like just outside their price range. Like I feel like that's like the macro version of this. So we added a luxury section to our website, and that has been part of like an overarching strategy to like increase our sale price and position ourselves as luxury specialists with our sphere. And that's been very, very successful. I feel like I've embedded a lot of Easter eggs in today's presentation. Oh, and you know what? I want to show you one more thing. Let me just toggle to a different screen. One of the things I do for my team is I also send an email out on their behalf. And as I created this, I was like, oh man, this is not going to be relevant to Diana's sphere because she lives in the city and it it just didn't translate. So I had her just give me one tip of somewhere she went to eat recently. So we kept all of the same content. So again, if I'm going to give you a tip of how you could do this, do your short little bullet points at the top here. Maybe share one or two local events upcoming. Don't worry about all of this volume. I just happen to have a kind of a big chunk to say. And then she couldn't think of anything. And I was like, Diana, like, where did you guys go to eat recently? And she was like, oh, we just had really good barbecue at this place. And I was like, great. Did you happen to take a picture of you or your daughter? And she was like, well, I have this like silly picture of my husband. I was like, perfect. So, and I made this up for her. I just looked at their menu and noticed they had gluten-free food, which is probably why they were there because she's gluten-free. And then I dropped in the picture of her husband, and this got really good click. So just to show you like a much shorter version of like the local flavor of the month, this did really well. By the way, people love to see the husbands and wives and partners. They love to see the family members. So that would be one other tip I would give. So I'm gonna stay and do Q&A for anyone who has time, and I'll send the follow-up out like I mentioned. I'll give you guys a copy of this email. I'm happy to share it. I have a podcast episode on leveling up your email marketing that is in the same vein, but very different information. So I'll link that up if this is something you feel like you want to go further with. And then if you really want to learn more, my Agent Academy is coming back out in April. I've facilitated it twice. I'm in the process of re-recording it so that people can take it kind of on a self-paced basis, but then still kind of mastermind and be mentored by me through like some other mechanisms like live Zooms like this. So if anyone's interested, you can join the wait list and get kind of I'm doing like a beta price when I roll it back out to thank. There's some people that have been on the wait list for a year waiting for me to stop being postpartum and come back. So that's everything about what I wanted to say. So any questions? I'm gonna just check the chat box and see if I missed anything. Um, yeah. Questions or thoughts, takeaways. I'd love to hear anything you have to say. Just unmute yourself. I'm ready.
I just want to say how much I enjoy like just um being part of like your learning community. Your podcast is so great, and I'm new-ish in the industry, and I just feel like I'm on a great team, but I feel like I've also like learned so much from you about like marketing and strategizing and that sort of thing. So I'm just like happy that you're providing these resources, and yeah, and if you have not listened to Tina's podcast, you should, because it's awesome.
Oh my gosh, you sound like a plant. Thank you so much, Sophia.
I'm not, I swear.
Seriously though, thank you. I really appreciate that. There's something about putting out the podcast that is so strange. It's kind of like email, but even less. It's more opaque. Like there are stats to see who's listening, but you just don't get any feedback. It's not like social media where you might get like some likes or comments. So it feels a little bit like an echo chamber at times. So whenever people tell me they listen, I'm like, really? Oh, uh, any other questions? Oh, Michelle asked me to spell the name of Danielle. So she's not a realtor. She's a marketing thought leader and teacher. Her last name is Canty, Canty. She's a great follow on Instagram, and I will link up all of her information. And like, I'm going to send a recap with this recording. So we'll do that. Does anyone want to brainstorm how to apply this to themselves? I feel like it can be a little hard to see your path sometimes if you feel very stuck or insecure about maybe taking a little bit more of a personal approach. It's something I've definitely been working into slowly. Does anyone want to spitball a little bit?
I
will
totally
try.
would.
There
Yeah.
she is. I was like, Katie's gonna
Oh,
give
somebody
you a
else
bite.
spoke up too.
Okay.
Well, maybe I can crowdsource actually, because at the moment, I've been in for almost 2 full years, like I'm approaching my first renewal. And so a lot of my sphere is just like family and friends. So I range from like people who've never bought a home to people who have been in a farmhouse for 50 years and they're going to die in that house. So, and it's like Carroll County. I live in Owings Mills, so it's like kind of that area, but I have trouble, like it's not like a hot spot like Timonium or downtown. So I kind of struggle with like local things because Westminster is a little sleepy, but I mean there's some good things happening. It's just not a
You're in a rural place when you think Timonium is a hot spot. So that's funny. But
yeah. I grew up in Gamber, okay? Like
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, well, I was thinking like I feel like you if I think about what I've seen you post on Instagram, like I feel like you're cooking, like is there a recipe you can share, something like that you're doing or somewhere, like I know you go and do things with your kids, like there's got to be something. So maybe don't worry about it being, I don't think it needs to be sexy and cool. Like that was literally my thing. I was like, I am not cool anymore. I never really was, but I'm definitely not now. Like I don't go anywhere. Like I work virtually. Like again, my world
yeah.
feels so small with an infant and a toddler, but I am still doing things or reading things or thinking about things. So I think you could even give yourself permission to maybe not have it be like, I think local is important, but if one of the three things, if you wanted to do a couple tips is like something you read or where you know,
Yeah.
went to church. Like,
Okay.
so does anything come up when I just throw more at you to think about?
Yeah, I mean, we go to like breweries and wineries a lot because it's like they're actually very family friendly these days.
Yeah.
And like I'm in a group of ladies group at the moment. We were talking about ways to be more authentic, and one of the things is like I'm obsessed with plants. Like I have over like 65 plants in my house now, so it's
Oh my gosh.
talking more
I didn't know
about
this about you.
yeah. So maybe like my struggle is I'm not like a master or an authority of anything. Like everything's trial and error in my life, literally everything. So eh, being okay, I guess, with sharing it anyway, like
Yeah. And I think
is
instead of,
okay.
I don't think it matters being a master. That's nice. I'm certainly not the master of some of the things that I'm sharing about. Like the toddler spot, I just discovered everyone's like, everyone knew about it but me. But I was like, whatever, I'm going to share it anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it could be, think about more like what you're into right now versus being the tastemaker who is like
Yeah. I
the
like the
first to
book.
know about everything.
Yeah. I like
Also, one thing that I was gonna suggest, Katie, is because you like your sort of like core group sounds like it's a little further out. Um, you made like highlight like a farmer's market or something and say like this is 30 minutes away or whatever, like if you do something a little bit bigger like a new local, like a new restaurant that opened up, and like tell people like, oh, within 20 minutes you can be enjoying this beautiful dish of pasta and like take a picture of it.
yeah.
Stuff that like gives people sort of like a sense of like their time investment because you're a little bit further out.
Hmm.
So I don't know, that's just an idea.
I
Yeah.
agree. And if you want something where you can kind of have a theme for a while, I think a brewery or winery of the month. Oh my gosh, listen to that sweet little one. Um, what if you decided to do a brewery or winery every month until you get tired of it? Whether that's 3 months from now or come November when it's not like good weather anymore, but you could really just
Yeah.
kind of go with, I like to go with something until I'm sick of it. And then I'm like, I'm done with that. I'll never do that again. So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
And no
maybe you
one
could,
keeps track of those things too. Like that's something
no,
I've had to learn. Like, oh, if I do this 1 month and not the next month, nobody's going to be like, well, where'd that part of it go?
totally.
Everything.
That it's sort of like my Facebook group that was like dead for years and then became like a cornerstone of my business. Like
Yeah.
it's
I
just
love that.
things can wax and wane. So yeah, my takeaway, if I were just like to give you a prescription for it, I would say a brewery or winery that kind of checks the local box, and it doesn't need to be hyper local, just within especially everywhere, everyone who lives in your area is probably used to driving for anything they do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
whether you right, so like
Yeah.
something like that, and I think plants are very, and again, if you come back to this thought of like all things home, like I think a lot of people are have plants or want to have plants or wish they didn't have a black thumb. So I think just like a tip or like a plant you're loving or the easiest plant to keep alive or the one plant
Oh,
that
yeah.
like you would never recommend.
Yeah. I
So
like that. That's cute.
yeah,
And All Things Home is literally the title of my email too.
perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully other people got some good stuff out of that too.
No, thank you. Thank you for being
I'd
willing
love
to
to
speak up.
I'd love to jump in and give a suggestion for
Yes.
I actually love the plant thing and I was going to do that, but my toddler started talking. I was going to suggest
Okay.
that. So because plants are kind of a big thing right now. For there's a whole bunch going on in the plant world for just if you scroll Instagram, whatever. So I love that. But also I have a newsletter that I always open and she always recommends a product that she's found and it can be anything. A new cleaning solution, a new shop, a new outfit, whatever it is. Just a product that could be helpful to somebody or just sharing. So
Thank you. That's such a good idea. I hadn't even thought about products I'm loving. But yeah, thank you. And Michelle, you're trying to get your hand in and the hand raise button is missing. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
Hi.
oh no, it's okay. It might just be on mine. So thank you for doing this. So quick question. How do you feel about like if I want to zone in on kind of the area where I live, but I also, which is Harford County, but I also do a lot in Baltimore County. How would you suggest handling that? So like, back when our team was somewhere else, I would have them put like the graph of both counties up, with just home sales or whatever that the gal would create for us. But now I don't, it's kind of hard to fit everything on one. And I don't know I just don't want people to think, oh, she doesn't do anything in Baltimore anymore. If I'm focusing now a little more on
Totally.
Harford.
Okay, I have two thoughts and you can tell me what is more feasible. One option would be to have a Harford County highlights and a Baltimore County highlights section, an
Okay.
event and a local business or whatever you're loving or on your list to try. Or if your CRM is in good shape of where people live, you could consider two different email segments.
Mhm.
That's two different emails. That's definitely more work. But if you feel like very strongly about that, you could basically do a little bit more work to be much more targeted.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think I like option A a little better, but
The highlights of both. Yeah.
yeah,
I would say I've started to go back here and there when I've had time to try to, separate that out a little bit, hashtag all those people for sure, but haven't gotten through probably more than 200 of my like 900 in the system,
do
which
you
some,
have
are,
do you have all their addresses for the most part?
I don't. Home
Oh,
addresses,
okay.
no.
Yeah. That's the what I call the dirty work. It's like doing that like database overhaul at some point or over a period of time. And then eventually there's that reward where when you want to segment, it's so easy. So I think, yeah, for the meantime, I would just do maybe two quick sections. And again, people don't read much. So I would say 2 to 3 tips per area with some pictures in between and like you're good.
Okay. Yeah, we use follow-up balls. I don't know how you feel about that versus.
Yeah, I love Follow Up Boss for CRM. I just don't love it for email formatting or delivery. So
Okay.
I design in Flowdesk And then you can either just download your follow-up boss contacts periodically and import them to Flowdesk, which is a 2-minute task. It's annoying, but it's like very quick. Or there's a way to set up an automation where your follow-up boss contacts can zap right into Flowdesk. So that's a whole other thing, but it's very worth it to me to have the separate email platform. I don't know of any CRM that has like good internal email design capabilities. So that's just like kind of a thing that we all have to make a decision about whether we want to separate the email marketing aspect or not. And I think it's worth it for most people.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so good to see you. Thanks for coming.
No, thank you.
Anyone else? Any other Q&A? All right, well, I'm going to send a recap out probably next week. And when I say I'm going to send this video to my amazing marketing gal and she'll put it together. So look for the resources. And then if anyone has quick follow-up thoughts, or if you send something and use Flowdesk, forward it to me. I want to see it. So show me your work. I'd love to see someone's implementation. And otherwise, I will talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for taking the time.